Yeah.
The N64 shits all over the NES, especially with the Zelda games. I don't care what you boomers have to say.
Well, from a technical perspective, obviously it does.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah. I mean,
But gaming wise,
I'm gonna just hold up my controller and say it was awesome. Still is. Still
I'm
play
sure
it.
Smooth Jam is just being a bit fun here, but still,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't know. Like, there's something about some of those classic games, as simple as some of them are, that keep me coming back to where there's lots of games in that Polygon era that I just will not revisit. Not at all. Don't care. Don't care if I ever play Tekken ever again. Like any of those 3D fucking nasty looking games. No, I'm good. Mecha J says, "Do you think that Sega could have continued making consoles to this day?" I think the market is so. I think once Sony got a foothold and Xbox decided they were going to throw in, it would have been over no matter what.
Yeah.
There's only so much room in the market for so many systems. Nintendo has its little niche. It's more than just little. They have their niche when it comes to the family. Yeah, to the family audience.
Their IP is bigger than even Disney brand.
Sony, on the other hand, did what Sega tried to do, but did it better.
Sega did some strategic mistakes in the 90s that cost them the confidence of gamers. And that is, in no small part, what led to the premature death of the Dreamcast, which is a shame because of its generation. The PlayStation 2 was the best selling. That had the DVD player, which really clinched the deal on that one. But if you just look, if you ignore the DVD aspect, and if you just look at the pure capabilities as a gaming console, the Dreamcast was the best console of that generation. But there were issues, and all of them could be traced back to the past. More than anything, it was the 32X that killed Sega.
You know, I still own all those old consoles, right? Someday I'm just going to drag them all out of storage and just say, okay, here's my original Intellivision. Here's my Intellivision 2. Here's my ColecoVision. And just go through all that. Because, I mean, I would still reach out and play. It's why the 64 is sitting, here, is because, I have a television in this room that I can just play the 64 on when I want to. And I'm a fan of pretty much everything up until the most recent modern games. And that's because, again, they've destroyed themselves. I mean, case in point, Saints Row, right? There was no reason to reboot that franchise with a Fortnite look with, Zoomers. That was a bad plan. It looks bad. And it's poorly received. And the sales reflect that.
I mean, honestly, though, and looking back, I would say my favorite console is PS3. So that's another reason why I say Sony kind of picked up the baton where Sega had fumbled it. But Andre's right. Somebody had to make those mistakes early on to know you shouldn't do that shit. And Sega, unfortunately, was the canary in the coal mine to learn not to do all this stupid shit with doing add-ons and all this other bull crap, because Sega, they lost sight of why they became what they were in the first place. Because Sega was, first and foremost, they were the more affordable option. But what they also did is they didn't shy away from playing straight to their audience, which is exactly what Sony did, right? And that was at that time young teenage boys and whatnot. And Sega played right to that audience, and then they realized we have an adult audience here too, which Sony really ran with later on. But Sega kind of tapped into that early on, but then them getting greedy and trying to add this and that with the 32X and the Fugazi bullshit.
It's understandable, though. In a sense, it's understandable what they did, because...
Oh, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Somebody had to do it first, right?
Yeah. Because Sega was... The reason that they were able to outcompete the Nintendo, or well, certainly, if not outcompete, then certainly compete with, was because they had a completely maverick mentality and they broke all the rules. And that worked for them up to a point. But then that same risk-taking suddenly started backfiring, because what really screwed them over was the difference between Sega of Japan and Sega of America. Because in America, Genesis was the shit. It was super popular.
It was.
In Japan,
Oh yeah,
the Mega Drive was never a hit. It was always like the third and last choice of the major consoles of that generation in Japan.
I gotta imagine it was received
Japan,
like the original Sega was here. But yeah, go ahead.
So in Japan, they were desperate to move on to the next thing, whereas in America, they were like, no, we got to stick with the Genesis. And it was that conflict between the two right there, which led to the continuous, or what I'm looking for, two things happening at the same time. You had like the development of the Sega Saturn
Simultaneously.
Thank you. Simultaneously, the simultaneous development of the Sega Saturn and the 32X for the two different markets.
God, the Saturn was just a failure commercially.
It was a complete failure, and that it was also the launch of the Saturn. The Sega Saturn had the worst launch of any gaming console in history. You know what happened? It was at the E3. This is where they announced it. This is where you announce all of the consoles. This is where like the PlayStation, everything was announced. And Sega figured, okay, as it is right now, our console is scheduled to arrive in stores at roughly the same time as the PlayStation. And the PlayStation right now has like more hardware support. They are a little bit ahead of us on this whole 3D curve, stuff like that. So they're probably going to beat us if we get to the market at the same time. But what if we beat them by several months? What if we actually launch at E3? That's what they were thinking. So then they had like this secret memo go out. They told all of their developers that, you know how we said that you need to have your launch games ready in 6 months from now? We were joking. We need them in 2 weeks. And that obviously wasn't going to happen, which meant that that year's E3, they launched that, oh, here's this amazing Sega Saturn, and it'll be available not in November, but in your store right now. We secretly shipped it out. You can go get it right now. And the problem with that was that the kids at the time, they didn't have time to save up. They had time to save up the resources to buy them day one if it were to come out in November. But you tell them, oh, here's the console you thought was going to come in November is here right now. You don't have the money to buy that right away.
Not only that, also, the timing for parents buying stuff for Christmas too.
Games. Yeah. The games all suck. They were buggy shit releases. Those were there because they were incomplete. Well, that launch killed the Saturn.
It did, and rightfully so. And the console only lasted for 4 years, and it's why they moved on to another generation. That's probably, I think, one of the shortest-lived generations in between of any of the consoles. If I'm not
absolutely, but basically, then you had the dual failure of the 32X and the Sega Saturn.
Yeah,
because the 32X, there was like released 40 games for it or something. So everyone that bought that, they were screwed over. And if they then went and they bought a Sega Saturn, and then that was discontinued 2 years later, well, that burned off so many of their built-in user base that many weren't coming back for the Dreamcast, although that was the best console of the generation.
Yeah, the Dreamcast was the best console of that generation. There's no doubt about it. And you know, the Saturn had advantages that nobody ever, nobody had conceived of yet, because I think it was
online gaming before there was an internet.
Well, it had dual processing, right? It had two processors on the board, if I'm not mistaken. And then like there was a bunch of different architecture going on inside there that hadn't been done before.
It didn't quite work the way they claimed it did, but yes.
No.
Like it was two processors working separately, not together, but yeah.
Right.